Alright, so what we're basically covering now, I'm sorry this is going to be shaky, but I don't have anything to sit this on while we do this. So you guys are probably going to go, hey, your head is on, and we never saw a video on how to install that. Well, that's because the head goes back on the same way that it comes off, and I think I covered pretty much that, so just run the video in reverse and you'll end up with how to put it back on. One small exception. The washer for the nut on here and here has to go in first. Okay? You put that in the head, you put the head down on the studs, and you just let her go down. Alright? Next thing is while this may have not been a problem for you removing the head, it will have become a problem for you trying to put the head back on if you are using the ARP stud kit. ARP neglects to inform you that the socket that goes down there to put the head bolt on, which is one of these, okay, won't fit. The size, you need a 1/2 inch 12 point, okay, in order to tighten it up. And while a standard 1/2 inch 12 point won't fit in there. Now, some people, Bill at Piranha Raceworks, has been very fortunate enough to find a socket that would fit in there. I, unfortunately, had to make one. And what I did was I went to Proto Tools, got the strongest 1/2 inch socket that they had that was non-impact, because it's just excessive material, and threw it on a lathe and ground it down and smoothed it out so I didn't gull anything. Okay, it looks a little rigidy and everything, but it's not. It's pretty smooth. And how you will know if your socket will fit in there? Well, the hole, the largest socket that you could slide in there and still make proper contact with the threads is 0.69 inches. Okay, that's the maximum from side to side that you can do on a 1/2 inch socket. Okay, your average socket seems to be in around 0.72. Okay, and that causes an issue because of the way Hyundai did the holes. Now you could be thinking, hey, why don't I just drill the holes bigger on my head? Well, you can't really do that without affecting the bearing mechanism here, as the Genesis coupe does not use individual bearings for your cams. It uses direct aluminum. Okay, so if you wear out your cam, your head, then you just replace it, and it's unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. Now, something else that I must show. One moment. Okay. Now, you see this stuff here? That is raw aluminum. That is just flashing that I got out of my head. Okay? Now, this stuff came out when I port flushed the head. And port flushing, as we discussed in a previous video, is running an oil detergent or oil and grease remover through the ports and channels of the object in order to remove the old stuff. Okay? So these chunks of aluminum, they're not from anything in particular, they're not from anything special, they are just, as you remember in one of the previous videos, talked about that crap that Hyundai had left all over here. Well, apparently they left a bunch inside the head too. So it's a good thing I decided to port flush it, because somehow these had gotten stuck somewhere, and they could have made for real unhappy, real sad panda, to be honest, if this had gotten loose. And I mean, this was just a ticking time bomb. That's bad enough junk that it was. All it would have had to do is dislodge and land in a valve assembly or something like that. or worse, because I'm not exactly sure where they came out of, because I was just flushing the whole thing all at once. I mean, they could have come out of my oil controls valve port here, or wherever, controlling my cams, and that would have been horrible. So, yeah, at first I thought, nah, I wasn't going to port flush the head because I wasn't doing anything to it, so just, drop and swap, right? But no, it's a good thing that I decided to do that. Now, other things, you'll notice that there is a number beside an arrow. Maybe that's a bad example. I'll do this one. There's a number beside an arrow, and I have a little number on there because I wrote some stuff on there. And what that means is that arrow points in the direction of the middle of your valley here, I guess. So the arrows always point in. There is also engraved on there, and I don't know how well it's going to show up. Let's try and focus it. See those engravings? It says E2. So that's exhaust side number 2. So that we know that the arrow points this way, exhaust number 2, which means 1, 2, 3, 4 on the exhaust side. Okay? Now, what does that number mean? Going back to that number there. What does that mean? Well, what that is the bearing size. Okay? So, Hyundai has their own little spec for these caps. Okay? And they're bearing sizes. So, we've got a 7, and a 7, and a 3, and a 6. And over here, we've got a 6, 3, 4, 7. Right? So, they don't mean anything in reference to each other, just FYI. It is just pure bearing sizes, okay? Now, this thing here, which I guess I didn't really cover when removing the cams, because I don't think I actually covered that, but either way, this thing here is you put a wrench on here in order to hold the cam still when you take everything out, so you don't damage this module here. It's very sensitive. So, I guess we can kind of cover the cams a bit, because they're in here and they're all whatever. This module here is the thing that controls the chain drive connection to the actual cam section. Okay, so it's got a spring in here, and if you guys are familiar with how oil-driven CVVT systems work, then I'm not going. You don't really need to pay attention, but I'm not going to go into it too much in detail because there's lots of people who have done excellent videos on how these things work. So essentially, you have oil that comes through the block, and it goes to a little solenoid here. The solenoid has a bunch of little holes and keys, and it either bleeds oil off, which dumps it out here, or it runs it through the cam. Full set, locks the cam up, or advances the cam as far as it can go, and makes you the most amount of ponies. When your cam's retard, this not really slows, but changes the time in which that the, I guess you can say, the point of the cam lobe duration. So this is peak, okay? We'll just call it the peak, because that's kind of what it is. When the peak hits, right, and it adjusts it to a certain amount of degrees. Now, degrees are important because cams operate at half the speed of the engine, okay? So that means saying 5,000 RPM on a cam. Well, is the cam going 5,000 RPM, or is the engine going 5,000 RPM? You would think it's pretty straightforward, but believe it or not, it's not. So what we do is we talk in degrees. That's degrees of advance and degrees of retardation. And those degrees are variable outside of the RPM aspect of it. So it can advance 10 degrees regardless if it's at 200 RPM or if it's at 2000 RPM. So that's why you'll see cams in degrees, not at RPMs, okay? And companies will advertise, oh, it makes X amount of more torque at such and such RPM. All you're doing with cams is you're changing where it comes in and running it further down the duration, okay? The RPM band. Sorry, the bad choice of words. You're actually physically limited on how long you can keep an exhaust or an intake valve open with a traditional cam system, okay? Whether you're doing rocker cams, single insert cams like on an LS motor, you're doing double overhead cams with rocker bodies like an Evo, or you're doing direct acting tap it on bucket, or bucket over valve time system like this. We have a complete limit to how long we can keep these open, and that's just a physical restriction based on how objects interact with each other, okay? If you look up Co and Seg, they're doing an awesome technology on pneumatically driven valve, cam valves, which allow them to act like a DC circuit instead of like an AC circuit. And if you're aware, DC is square wave, right? Which allows you peak open, duration, close. Peak open, duration, close. Whereas an AC circuit goes builds, peak, and then trails down. Builds, peak, right? So you don't get as much open duration as, you only get a tiny amount versus a DC circuit, you get lots of open. So, look up Cohen-Zeg. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, sorry, Christian. But you're probably not watching my YouTube anyways, because you got better things to do. So, that's just a physical restriction on cam systems in general. So cams are just moving duration to different sections of the RPM band, and that's why there is no such thing as a one cam fits all. Okay, it doesn't work. This little doohickey at the end, this is your cam position sensor, and this just tells the ECU where the cam is in its duration. So it's basically verifying what this valve down here is doing, okay? Which I've, by the way, removed because I was cleaning. Very important to note, if you are taking your oil control valves out, if you drop them, they are garbage. They are very, very, very sensitive pieces of equipment. So if you drop them, rough them up, play hockey with them, they're garbage, okay? If you take them out, wrap them in a piece of paper towel to protect them, sit them so they can bleed down, not up. Okay, so the black part, let's go over to the toolbox. Okay, so when I'm talking about the oil control valve, this is what I'm talking about. It's got these little grooves in it that allow oil to seep past and operate the cam system. And when I'm talking about hanging it, I mean, sit it like this, so the oil can drain out of it this way. We don't want it sitting like this, which is kind of awkward anyways because of the plug. We don't want the oil seeping past the seals and going into the solenoid mechanism, okay? Now mine have already drained out, so it's perfectly fine for them to sit like that and live in the cubby. This sensor here is your cam oil temperature sensor. This is the only temperature sensor in your entire car for your oil. Okay, so if you're using an application like torque or something else, or you're looking for different PIDs on your CAN bus system, you're looking for oil temperature sensor. Okay, not oil temperature sensor. You're looking for cam oil temperature sensor. There is a little bit of a difference on the PID, and if you're tapping in for a gauge or something, because you can actually tap in, it's actually located right there. Okay, and Hyundai uses a really ugly and disgusting goop as a sealant. It's like this yellow caustic crap, so that'll all get cleaned out. Now, the passenger side and the driver side of the oil, or so your intake and your exhaust cam actuators, okay, oil solenoids, they're not interchangeable. They are specific to intake or exhaust, okay? So you can't just swap them around. Make sure you do clearly label them. All right, now, something else I wanted to cover. We Should have covered redoing the oil chain. But before you put your head on, you're looking for this groove. This little notch. It's a little white. It's marked white on mine because mine's brand new. But if you have an old one, just feel around and you're feeling for a cut. Okay? And that cut is your position. Alright? That's what you line up with that little marker on the valve cover for top, cylinder 1, top dead center. Okay? And that's very important before you put your cams in, because you don't want your cams slapping around or bumping into each other or anything like that. Okay? Or not into each other, but into your cylinders, because you'll just ruin stuff. And this little notch right here, that's just for balance. Okay? That's it. And that's just a mark from my engine balancer telling me that that was okay. But that's a brand new puppy. Nice and chainy. Now, something that I didn't get the opportunity to talk about before I put the ladder frame on, and it's because I was running out of time that day and I really just didn't feel like filming, but not a big deal. You see how there's a little tiny seam right there? It's just very, like, barely anything. Right? That's how much of an oil seal you need on the outside of your crank, your ladder frame, valve cover, timing cover, whatever. You do not need an 1.5 inch thick gloop of globby crap poking in out everywhere, okay? Your seal primarily is the metal-to-metal contact of these two systems, okay? This is your block, this is your ladder frame in a 2.0T, this is block, ladder frame, okay? And this here has a metal surface that mates to the metal surface of this, and they touch each other, okay? That is it. This is like, for anybody who's familiar with doing CPU paste on a computer, this is exactly like that. You do not want too much, because you will not be able to properly transfer heat through it. This goop stuff acts as a thermal barrier, okay? All it is there for is to smooth the two surfaces, fill in the gaps so oil cannot push past these two surfaces. The way to prevent an oil leak from forming in here is simple. Tighten your damn bolts up for to the proper specifications and it won't leak. Okay? This is just a gasket. Okay? Gaskets are not it's not even a gasket, okay? It's just a filler, all right? It is not there for the express purposes of making your engine look like shit, okay? Because you see here, you can't even see it. But I can assure you it's there. Because look, it goes right there. It's just a tiny bead. That's all you need. When you come around to this side, that's it. That's all that's poking into where my oil is going to be. You don't need a huge bead of that stuff, and I don't know what's with Hyundai techs, or at least mine, being so damn lazy and just glomping it on. Hyundai even has in your owner's manual, or in your assembly book, which mine is right there. Okay? In your book, it tells you exactly how thick of a bead you need. And if we come over here to my tool case, you'll see my Ultra. I use Ultra Copper. Okay? It's got a little notch at the end that's been cut off. That's all you need. You don't need this notch. You don't need. You just need that little cut off. You don't need this notch. You don't need that notch, and you sure as hell don't need that notch. Okay, so this is one of those prime examples of less is more. Okay, so don't fall into any kind of crappy hype or anything like that. That you need to do whatever, because you really don't, okay? Now, you might be wondering, why is my manifold on right now, and my exhaust manifold, you might have noticed, and why I've not covered a video on that. Well, we can talk about that in this video. It is so much easier to reach these bolts, okay, when none of this is here. So that's why I've done that, okay, because I could easily put all of this stuff in. Also, my manifold, because I no longer have a vacuum tank sitting here, all of this is cut out. I can easily reach down here without affecting any of it. And still waiting on the injectors, so that's why they're not installed. and then just sitting there waiting for the fuel line. But all of this stuff is going to not even slowly, it's just going to just start getting hammered back on. Which all of this stuff goes off, or goes back on in the exact reverse removal. All of this stuff. On the other side, however, on this side, it doesn't. And that's because you've got this fitting here, which is your oil filter housing is what it's technically called. And then I've got an oil cooler, okay, which is taken off of a 2013. So 2013 owners, this is what you guys have, and you got two little spigots here. And then up here, you've got your water, okay, which has got a weird shaped gasket thing that goes on here. And it needs its gasket installed. And then I've got an oil drain pipe. And just for anybody curious, without modifying your ladder frame, you're looking at 0.452. Of a hole here. Okay, so anything above, say, 4 AN fitting, which I don't happen to have mine here, but a 4 AN drain for your turbo is pretty much as large as you can run on the stock block. So upgrading to a 10 is just too big. It's just not going to do what you need it to do. Okay. Now, some of you, nah, won't get into that. Turbo, it's got a rag stuffed up in there right now, which I'll remember to take out when I do the turbo up. Just waiting on the new gaskets from Grimspeed. And the head gasket. Now, head gasket, as we've seen before, and I've talked about before, the 4B11T Cosworth head gasket just doesn't work for the Gen Coupe, so I didn't use it. And Fred Bean Hyundai supplied me with a new, a complete engine gasket kit, to be honest. They've supplied all of the gaskets for this build. And they're really nice guys. And they made sure that I got all my stuff, so happy with them. But you're going to see some pictures on the Project Woodstock Gen Coupe page of the new 2013 head gasket. Either way, Hyundai changed the design of the head gasket between the years. So you're going to see a couple of pictures posted up there in the next little bit of, or actually they will be posted up there now. If you haven't already seen them, definitely go out onto the thread and check out the new head gasket design. There's little dimples and change to the water jacket flow. Why Hyundai did it, I have no idea, but I'm assuming they have their reasons because, well, they usually do. So if anybody's curious, this stuff here, like these bars and stuff, well, this is a drain channel. But all of this stuff in here, that's called webbing, just if anybody was curious. And see how this part here is thinner or deeper set in than this part up here? This is your water jacket right here, okay? And then this is the bottom of your piston liner, okay? So when Quartermaster, or Jim, however you know him, was talking about when you have the old sleeves taken out and you have to have a little bit of machine work done for the Darton sleeves, at least the ones that he did, you have to be really careful because you might hit the water jacket. What he's talking about is this space in here. Hyundai doesn't have a whole lot of room, and it's not really critical. Like the Evo X has a lot more webbing of this stuff here, I guess you could say. For for block rigidity. But obviously Hyundai took the lightweight route. Cheap. But it is something to be of note that you don't actually have all that far before you hit the water jacket. And if for whatever reason you are touching your block after running it, down here will be hotter than up here. And that's just because this is where all the cooling happens. It's in this section here. So, alright, so that should cover it for this video. And the next video will be... I have no idea, actually. We will see you guys next time, and thanks for watching. Thanks for staying in, tuned in, and we should have we've still got quite a bit to go. Once the engine's in, I mean, we've still got lots to do. We've still got the dyno work to do, or sort of the tuning of it, and other such nonsense. Plus, I've still got a couple surprises left for you guys going on here. So we will see you guys in the next video.